back to the most up-to-date news source in the trucking industry. Road Dog Trucking News with your host, Mark Willis.
Hey, drivers, want to welcome a new voice to the program, Rand Taylor, CEO, co-founder of what is called the Industrial Sustainability Group. And we're going to talk about the rapid rise in diesel fuel prices squeezing freight transportation, companies and customers, and basically leaving small trucking operators struggling to catch up with some of the escalating costs. And Rand, I want to welcome you to the program, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks a lot for having me, Mark. Appreciate it.
Well, absolutely, sir. Tell folks a little bit about you, background, as to what you do, the company, and then we'll go from there. Welcome aboard.
Hey, thanks. Well, Industrial Sustainability Group was created about 9 years ago, and the whole focus on what we do is to take fuel, and we have a fuel additive called fuel ox with a combustion catalyst, and make it burn more thoroughly and give you better fuel efficiency and reduce emissions as well, so it lowers your carbon footprint. But we also have with that our Infinity Lube lines that, when used in conjunction with the fuel ox, gives you a cleaner running and a smoother running engine by reducing the torque and drag within the engine. So the combination of the two are really the best thing you could possibly do to get better fuel efficiency and be more efficient. And the last thing is, I'll tell you that the Infinity Lube lines are all 100% plant-based and totally toxin-free.
All right, talk about some of the prices we're seeing at the pumps. A lot of the smaller fleets, independent operators are really getting hit hard. I mean, they're exposed to diesel prices that are hitting record highs. Does this mean that due to that fact they've got less leverage with a lot of shippers and are having a harder time maybe matching up the fuel surcharges to the rising rates of what's going on at the pumps?
Well, I think the problem, first of all, the answer to your question is yes. But I think the big problem here is the time lag that takes place when all this happens. And unfortunately, as prices rise or fall, if they do so in a calm, slow basis, it's easy for everyone to react to it and to adjust. But it's happened so abruptly in the last 2 weeks that it's caught a lot of people off guard, and it's really hard to pass on those kind of charges that the smaller truckers are experiencing. To pass them on to everyone else, it's just very difficult for them. It takes time to do that, and unfortunately, they're left feeling the brunt and paying the difference.
We mentioned the price of diesel, the fuel that's used by truckers. This is also impacting a wide swath of industrial operations as well. Correct or not? I mean, when you got $1.10 a gallon, that diesel's gone up in the last 2 weeks, and that's immediately following Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. I mean, it's really sending, I think, energy shockwaves throughout multiple industries, including the trucking side. Is that right?
Well, take it one step further back. When you look at the cost of diesel, the cost of diesel is tied directly to the cost of a barrel of oil, right? Of crude oil. Now, what does crude oil create? And crude oil creates plastics. It creates, believe it or not, it creates some food products. It creates all kinds of things that are all passed on. And the cost is not just diesel fuel. It's everything, and people don't understand that, a lot of what you get in medicines are petroleum-based, And then when you talk about the transportation costs go into everything that goes on the shelf everywhere, even if they're not petroleum products. So the costs the cost for a barrel of oil to go up in price is impacted almost everywhere you look, and not just your gas tank.
Are you expecting, Rand, the prices to come back down at some point? I guess the old law of supply and demand physics comes into play. What goes up has got to come down at some point, but we're seeing no signs of the tensions in the Ukraine against Russia abating anytime soon. So does the invasion, in your estimation, plunge the global energy markets into turmoil, and that sent the price of crude surging to what we've got today?
Well, let's look at the actual what it takes to get a barrel of oil out of the ground and that process. Now, that process was pretty much stopped, not stopped, but inhibited greatly in the last 12 months. Okay, so there's been less oil being pumped to begin with. I mean, just in the oil itself in the United States, we're pumping a lot less oil than we were 2 years ago. Now, for us to all of a sudden take the Russian component out of the world fuel market and the oil out there, take the Russians out of it. First of all, it's very difficult to do that. But if you were to just consider that, then us replace it with our own production, which we're capable of doing. But that ramp-up process is very long. It's very difficult to do that because once you take, for instance, we have, I think, about 700. Last I saw, Baker Hughes said we had about 750 rigs that were drilling here in the United States today, as opposed to 2,500 2 years ago. Okay, to all of a sudden bring back 2,000 rigs or 1,800 rigs the way we had 2 years ago, you just can't do it. Because first of all, the labor alone is not there. All those guys that were working those rigs before are out doing something else today. Yeah, so it's hard to bring them back.
Yeah, interesting you mention that because wasn't it 2 years ago that we were the world's leading energy producer? And I'm pointing up to what went on in the shale arena, Permian Basin, things like that. And, over 2 years, we have lost that footing. So, talk about how we could be number one in the world, and now we're not number one in the world when it comes to energy production. Environmental rules, politics play a lot in this role?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to get too much into the politics of it, but the bottom line is that there were a number of rule changes that took place with the new administration in Washington. The shutdown of the Keystone Pipeline, the moratorium that's been created on drilling on government lands. These are all things that really inhibited the oil production in the country. And to bring those all back right away is going to be very difficult to do.
Well, and I would imagine you're also expecting prices to continue to go up, like you're mentioning, for a number of petroleum-based products. I mean, pretty much everything across the board. Would it be a good rule of thumb maybe to say, well, this is going to be going on for at least the next year or maybe 2 years beyond that, or is there some concern about the crystal ball forecasting with this? How do you view that?
Well, I think that you have a number of factors involved here. It's not just the cost of oil going up, And I'm not an economist, but let's face it, I do pay attention to what's going on. There was a 7.5% inflation rate over the last 12 months. And the likelihood of that continuing. And then on top of that, you have the supply chain problems, which are nowhere close to being solved. There's shortages of everything. And you know as well as I do, just supply and demand. If you have shortages of things, well, the prices aren't going to go down. Okay, so and there's shortages of almost everything at this point in one way, shape, or form. So it's I think prices are probably continuing higher. Prices for fuel, we'd love to see them stabilize around here, but I think $100 a barrel is probably which is where fuel, which is where the global oil market is roughly today. I think is not a crazy standard for the next foreseeable future.
When you look at prices for a barrel of oil coming in about $100 $100, I should say, just on average there, does this really give the oil companies an incentive to go out and drill more if the prices are this high? What do you think?
Well, it doesn't hurt, okay? But the problem that oil companies always have to do is they have to look into their crystal ball, and they have to say, where is this going to be? Where is this going to be? A year from now, 2 years, more importantly, probably 3 or 4 years. And I think that's what happened is over the course of the last year and a half or 2 years, they looked into their crystal ball and said, hey, you know what? We don't need to create as much oil, and they kind of cut back a little bit, and now we're caught more or less, in a tough spot. And now you're looking at is oil going higher? Is it not going higher? It probably is going higher, and it probably does incentivize them to start drilling again. But again, their time frame and their lag time from drilling to getting the oil out of the ground is not a short one. And there's literally billions of dollars that they have to invest, to do that.
All right, let's do this. We're going to get a break for a few minutes. Rand Taylor on, CEO, co-founder, the Industrial Sustainability Group, and we're looking at the current situation involving the price of oil. That translates to the price of diesel. And with everything going on, is this going to mean simply that we're going to be looking at more and more talk about electric vehicles coming into the forefront? Stay tuned. We got a bunch more coming up. I will update the weather on the other side. I'm Mark Willis on Sirius XM 146.
Back to the most up-to-date news source in the trucking industry. Road Dog Trucking News with your host, Mark Willis.
Hey, Robert, I just want to welcome you back to the program. And again, the phone number to call in, it's 888-876-2336. Nice to have on board my guest, Rand Taylor. And Rand, again, thank you very much for joining me on the program, the CEO and co-founder of the Industrial Sustainability Group. And nice to talk with you. And again, let's get the website out where folks can find you guys. What's the best way?
Yeah, it's fuelox.com, fuelox.com. It's an easy one to remember, and that's our home. So that's come and visit us and take a look and see what we got.
All right, outstanding, man. Again, thank you very much for joining me on the program to talk about this. I mean, we're talking about pump price increases that are adding hundreds of dollars a week to the cost of operating. Each truck carriers are scrambling to keep up, and especially with the national average price coming in at $5.25 a gallon just recently. These numbers are eye-popping, to say the very least, for many.
Oh, absolutely. It's I'm just driving around today. What's interesting too to see the variance of pricing. It shows you that there's some panic out there because the prices are all over the place. Just today, while I'm driving around in southern New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania area, I see prices everywhere from $5.10 to $5.60. So but when you see that, you can tell people really don't know what's going on, and they're very concerned, and they're, it's a little bit of panic is what it is, And unfortunately, we're probably going to have to get used to it, though, Mark, for a little while.
Okay, absolutely. And that, in fact, was one of the questions I have for you. Is this going to be the new norm for us going forward?
Oh, boy, I hope not. But unfortunately, I don't see any real light at the end of the tunnel here. It's just, yes. And a lot of it was brought on by what's happening in the Ukraine. And hopefully they can resolve that, although it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon either. But it might. We can pray that it might. But right. It's at the same token, again, to ramp up worldwide production, right afterwards, and to alleviate all that, I don't see that happening. So that's very difficult to do. So I think we got to get used to these prices for a little while.
What about as far as the argument involving electric trucks, and some articles out there about the fact that in this day and age, prices $5-6 a gallon for diesel, that we need to bring more of the electric vehicle market to the forefront. But let's look at this. I mean, the electric vehicle market is really galloping along at a full head of steam here. That this is going to be the next horizon. Many in trucking are buying into it, buying new vehicles that are electric, and things like that. Is this going to maybe make that call even louder for the electric vehicle folks, the proponents of this?
Well, I think that's the proponents of that are certainly hoping so, for sure. I just came back from the work truck show in Indianapolis, in Indianapolis a couple weeks ago, and there was EV trucks everywhere. So the environment is such that they're definitely pushing EV. Now, is that a wave that's gonna subside? Who knows? But I think that the bottom line is that there's some issues with EV that you don't have with diesel. Let's face it, diesel fuel is still the best form of energy, that we could have. for heavy equipment and for trucking and so forth.
Right.
You know, so I don't see that subsiding dramatically as quickly, at least, as a lot of the EV proponents would like to see happen.
Yeah, this is, I think, in its infancy stages out there, because there isn't a day that doesn't go by when an OEM or another major group is announcing some kind of a new development with the electric vehicle side to move the freight forward here. And this has got to be, I think, something that's going to make a lot of the trucking companies sit up and take notice, because I mean, if you've got an electric vehicle, you're going to be maximizing the use of that asset, bringing it to the table where it could do more for less, right? I mean, is it looking at it from that standpoint, maximizing that asset to get the most bang for the buck for it?
Well, maximizing the asset. Here's the thing. There's a lot of subsidies right now that are, and a lot of tailwinds behind that are pumping the EV market.
Yep.
Okay, and people, smart companies, are taking advantage of that, and rightfully so. They should. Now, but there are still big deficiencies that EV trucks have when being compared to diesel trucks. And the bottom line is that in the end, when you stop and think about the EV market, where does the electricity come from? Okay.
Yeah.
Right now, most of it comes from fossil. Okay. And then you have a number of other issues that are involved, just when it comes down to logistics of EV. So does everybody plug their EVs in at night, or what happens when you have a whole nation plugging in at night? Do you have a situation where you have to get rid of the batteries? Where do you put the batteries? The batteries are extremely toxic, and there still haven't been a real good formula for disposing of them. I mean, there's a lot of questions out there. Yeah, right. The EV wave is here, and if you're a smart company, you will take advantage of that. But how long will it take to actually take full force in the heavy trucking and the heavy equipment world? Probably longer than people anticipate.
Goodness sakes. Yeah, there's going to be quite a story to go forward here, especially when these EV companies are getting hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of capital for startup or for maintaining the current business operation and things like that. So there's got to be, I think, a return on the investment that a lot of these companies are looking at. They may be saying to themselves, okay, we're going to be maybe in the hole, in the red for a short period of time, but at some point, though, we're going to turn the corner. This thing is going to be making money as we go forward. I'm a firm believer of the statement, follow the money here, and that's why, we're going to see more stuff like this. All right, Rand, thank you, sir. I got to get ready to wrap it up, and appreciate you joining me on the program. Rand Taylor on board, and Rand, one more time where folks can find you on the way.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for having me on. Fuelox, F-U-E-L-O-X, fuelox.com. We have a combustion catalyst that usually saves about 6 to 8% in your fuel efficiency and cuts your emissions by well over 50%.
All right, Rand, I got to leave it at that, but thank you, man. I'm almost out of time for the segment.